Could I put it to Taoiseach, and I want to raise the issue of the aftermath of the Croke Park deal and the vote by the public sector workers to reject the deal that was presented to them by government, a deal which we said was unfair and had a disproportionate impact, particularly on frontline workers across the board. And also, I've criticised the strategy that was deployed to get this deal through, which was a combination of divide and conquer workers, of a bit of bribery at the end, and when all else failed, old-fashioned intimidation and threats, which I think ended in abject failure. But Taoiseach, you did ask when we raised this last week, you said that the government were going to take time out to reflect on the vote. It seems the reflection didn't really last more than 24 hours because the estimates were rammed through to committee here last week, which include the savings that are earmarked in the pay deal. So in essence, the estimates that we're going to be asked to vote on today contain the 300 million that the government expects to realise as a result of the deal that the workers rejected last week. And whilst the Minister has asked the Chair of the Labour Relations Commission the government, sorry, Minister Howland, I thought you were leading the charge on this, but obviously the government did. But in any event, you've asked him to reconsider. At the same time saying and raising the spectre yesterday that there could be compulsory job losses in the public sector, just throwing that out. You may put it back in again, of course. Taoiseach saying there really is only a fortnight and people must come back. Meanwhile, the estimates have been rammed through, and we don't even know how the 300 million is going to be made up of. And the Taoiseach and sources close to the government saying that the legislation that you promised, Minister Howland, in relation to the FEMPE, in relation to the Pensions Act, and in relation to the Payment of Wages Act, that those laws are going to be brought in. So, yes, that's what you seem to be confirming in your response to me there. So, in essence, Taoiseach, there seems to be a pretence going on that we really want to enter into renegotiation, but in reality, that's not going to happen. So, what I want to ask you this morning, Taoiseach, is it fair to say, and would you confirm to the House, that it actually is the government's real position to force the pay deal through, to bring in the legislation that Minister Howland promised some weeks ago in the context of this deal, and would you confirm that that legislation is actually ready to go?
Thank you.
First of all, thank you for your good wishes. I'll pass on the same to the Taoiseach. The House might indulge me for a moment, Concordia. This is the Job Shadow Initiative Day, and young people are working with various public representatives on this with the Irish Association of Supported Employment. And there are two young men, Michael Dunleavy and John Hines, who are shadowing the Taoiseach today on the Job Shadow Initiative Day, and they're in the public gallery, and I just want to recognise that, if that's okay. In respect of Deputy Martin's question, the position here is that the unions took their time to do their ballot and they made their decision. Government reflected on this and have asked, as government, the LRC to engage with the 21 unions to see is there a basis for negotiations, because the bottom line, as I've said before, and as has been confirmed by the Minister very clearly, is that the requirement to have 300 million in savings must come from within the payroll package this year, rising to $1 billion by 2015. That's been said very clearly. So the LRC will engage genuinely with the unions to see is there a basis for that. That's the first step that government instructed following the announcement of the votes of the unions. It's not true to say, Deputy Martin, that the estimates are being rammed through here. I know that your own people walked out of the committee that was to deal with the estimates yesterday for whatever reason, and I'd remind you that in your own pre-budget submission, the cuts that you were looking for this year were of the order of 350 million, which were more extensive and deeper than what was actually negotiated here. So it's very necessary for government to produce its estimates and not to produce them with gaps therein or brackets around numbers, because it is important that government be able to continue to do its work and to do its duty. The estimates before the Dáil this morning are not the entire range of estimates. They have been apportioned across different departments, and as the discussions take place on those estimates, there may be little adjustments here and there. In the case of the estimate before the House this morning, it is the estimate for the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform. And, for instance, the 130 people who work in shared services need to be paid, and they need to be paid this week. And that's why it's important that the estimate for the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform would go through today, so that those people can continue their work and be paid for their work. So in that sense, this is a very genuine process being followed here, because we have to achieve the savings that have been set out. When you refer to the threat of compulsory redundancies, what Minister Howland said was that if this were in a private company, there would be redundancies in train. The question, insofar as the public sector is concerned, is that the LRC, in their negotiations on Croke Park 2, that was an inherent part of it. But of course, if there's no agreement, there's no protection. And that's the point. So obviously the unions will now engage with the LRC to see is there a basis for negotiation in respect of the 300 million that's required this year.
Thank you.
That's why workers really get fed up with the kind of mixed messages that flow from government. That's a threat there, really, to workers. You're basically saying no agreement, no protection. Now, you did that about 2 months ago as well, and again, it wasn't followed through. So that kind of, we're reaching out on the one hand. On the other hand, if you don't play ball, there is no protection in terms of your employment. And nurses, healthcare workers, public servants felt the deal was fundamentally unfair. Now, there was a divide and conquer going on at the time, and it's continuing. And Minister Howland said yesterday he'll work with the unions that will work with him. And that old traditional number counting is what got this deal into trouble from day one. You were looking at the electoral college thing, you were counting the numbers, and you got it wrong. And you tried to isolate certain workers, particularly in the healthcare sector. We know the Gardaí were isolated much earlier on. And I think you need to go back to the drawing board in terms of how the deal was constructed and in terms of how the cuts were going, the composition of the pay cuts in relation to specific workers. Now, the Taoiseach has confirmed this morning that there will only be little adjustments. And the sources coming from government yesterday are saying there can only be a tweaking of the deal itself. And what I'm basically endeavouring to ascertain from the Taoiseach is that in reality, the laws that have to be enacted to give effect to this pay deal are ready, and that while informed industrial relations correspondents are saying the government has bought a bit of time for itself, it seems to me it has bought time to try and get the numbers right in here.
Thank you.
In terms of Labour Party backbenchers to vote for the necessary legislation to get this deal through. And that's basically what's on the agenda for the next fortnight, that deep down they know there isn't room for the kind of substantive negotiation of the deal that those representing the workers are saying is required, as compared to the government's position that only tweaking of the deal can actually occur. So the real agenda now is, can we get everybody on board to vote this pay deal through in the context of the legislation that is ready to go and that the Minister has drawn up?
Well, that's not a question, but let me remind you of what the truth is, and government have to deal with the truth and the facts. The unions rejected the proposals from the LRC, which were negotiated in full and open consultation in a very comprehensive way, unlike what happened previously when there was simply legislation ran through without any consultation or any engagement with the public sector in the first place. That was repeated on two separate occasions. Now, it's also true, Deputy Martin, that in the negotiations between the LRC and the unions on Croke Park 2, employment was protected by those negotiations and protected under Croke Park 2. It's absolutely true to say that if you have no agreement, you don't have that inherent protection. That's fact. Now, the position is that all of the unions were invited in the beginning to participate and to engage. All of the unions can now participate and engage again, because it is absolutely fundamental to getting our public finances right, that the savings of 300 million be achieved this year, and as has been pointed out, up to £1 billion by 2015. That's absolutely fundamental to what we have to do. Let me repeat again that the assertion that you're making, that the estimates are being ran through, is also untrue. The estimate this morning is for the Department of Public Expenditure and Reform, and it's necessary. Your people walked out of the meeting yesterday. You wouldn't engage on it. They walked out of the meeting yesterday. And the reason that that estimate has to go through this morning is so that people can be paid at the end of the week who are engaged in public service and public duties. So the process is now in train where the LRC engage with the unions. All of the unions can now come back in and give their views to the LRC. These savings must be achieved, and as I said before, the door of government is always open to the ideas and the expressions that the unions may wish to make here. There's an important process in place here, and government have recognised that, and I've asked the LRC to engage with the unions to see how best this might be achieved, because it has to be achieved.